we then find out that Venom Fang started watching creationist videos, and he said these presented him with the beautiful, wonderful evidence for the existence of the intelligent designer. But the Gentiles are not primarily Jews. I mean, this is an attractive proposition because it's leading him back into Judaism, but by a new path, a way which could give him superiority, where he was once kicked out and deprived of everything that kind of labelled him as part of his flock. What's interesting is that the Gentiles are not primarily Jews, but use the Jewish scripture, he says, and this is important because it's kind of bringing him back into it symbolically, a way back in, as kind of a form of redemption, as I was saying. And there's an interesting parallel between some of the verses he quotes and his own situation. He says, Isaiah 53, he was despised and rejected of man. But he then adds a qualifier, by his own people. He's talking about Jesus here. And he then says, but then he was raised from the dead and is a light to the Gentiles. What we can see here is a kind of interesting parallel. He's actually drawing between himself and Jesus. Just as Jesus was cast out by his own people, so was Venom Fang X. But now he returns as kind of a light to the Gentiles. He's established himself as something better than the Jews, a force more potent, which is more prevalent. I don't know how many Americans are Christian, but substantially more so than Jews. And as he has now become an advocate of Christianity, it's kind of upping his own symbolic power. He then says, Daniel 9:24-26, then Messiah shall be cut off, shall destroy the temple. And I find that clearly the superimposition of Christianity over Judaism is kind of lying heavily on his mind here. He is a redeemer to kind of throw down Judaism, but virtuously, through the kind of objective rightness of God. And, here we're kind of seeing, I think, a kind of very subversive but very powerful reason for him to accept the slightly strange and somewhat tenuous arguments of the creationists. He says, billions of Gentiles believe in the God of Israel, including me. Well, one of the kind of powerful now, as opposed to the few Jews. He then refers to his usual argument of belief from incredulity, cites the complexity of a cell, for instance, blah blah blah, it must have been created, and he draws a parallel with a microphone and says it could not have been formed by chance. But, why would a microphone be formed by chance? This is the same kind of bollocks we're acquainted with. Essentially, you have simple cells which evolve through need to make something complex. We don't have to understand the complexity of it to understand the process. You can't just draw an analogy with a microphone because a microphone is a tool created by an intelligent being, precisely for a kind of functional use, whereas evolution is not just functionary, it's absolutely necessary. We can draw a kind of extension to microphone. We could say that it kind of indirectly evolved via kind of the evolution of man. I mean, it's necessary in our age to have amplification, so it kind of evolved that first we would have had a cone or something of paper, and then by various sophisticated measures we then kind of create this device by which we can speak loudly. So in a sense that wouldn't have happened unless we had become the intelligent beings we are. So in a sense you could say that microphones are kind of predetermined as well, as just as much as humans probably have been. I mean, or rather, intelligent species is predetermined in some sense, for obvious reasons. You have series of species, and at the end one of them must be more intelligent than the others, just for kind of domination. And here we are, so how wonderful that is. Now, just to kind of put things in context a bit, I need to briefly allude to psychoanalysis, and I hope you'll bear with me on this. It's somewhat strange, but Freud postulates that the prepubescent child is pre-sexually sexual, and he has a kind of fantasy of his parents copulating. And then after puberty, this kind of memory is it kind of comes back like it was repressed, but then it kind of comes back to kind of haunt them, and then it's repressed again. Anyway, that's kind of a structuring force behind the child's later sexual life. Anyway, Freud thought this was a kind of phylogenetic structure, such that it was genetically arranged that every child would have this kind of fantasy of the primal scene, as it's called, the parents having sex. However, it's later been postulated that in fact the reason children have this fantasy is a reconstruction of enigmatic messages from their parents, and this is a really important bit. The parents, by their natural behaviour, everything they do, conveys to the child a language of sexuality, passing down a whole unconscious language of sex to their children, which is kind of interpreted by the children and kind of structured. Anyway, the father is kind of seen as this kind of phallic male who is the kind of dominator of the tribe, as it were. And for the boy, if it's a boy, this is kind of a quite attractive thing. And later on, if you know anything about Freud, you'll probably know that the boy is supposed to kind of have a sexual attachment to his mother because she's the first sexual object he has. And later he's kind of restructured by his father's dominance, such that he identifies with his father and then goes on to love other women instead of his mother because his father has his mother, so he can't have her. Anyway, the point is, in Venom X's case, he was thrown out of his tribe, and so he still had this yearning to kind of be the phallic male in some sense, and by his taking Christianity upon himself, through all the reasons I've discussed, the connection with Jesus and the kind of replacement of Judaism, he therefore asserts himself as the ultimate kind of phallic male. And you can see in his pedagogish attitude, he is leading, directing, teaching, and I think this is really the real reason why Venom Fang X is a Christian.